to do this. And there we go. Hello. All right, let's get the show on the road. Welcome. I am so glad to have you with me today. Healing and life extension. It's good to have you with us on Instagram as well. And it's good to have those of you with us who are on the live webinar, as well as those who are joining us in the Facebook group. Hello. Those of you in the Facebook group, I'd love it if you would say hello, just so I know who you are. And please feel free to be interactive with us no matter which platform you are joining us on. We are going today to do a little introduction to iridology. And we're doing this because there are so many kinds of iridology out there. There's a lot of different iridology philosophies. Our focus today is going to be specifically on the up-to-date, scientifically validated version of iridology, which is constitutional iridology. As we get ready to talk about this, I would love to take just a moment to introduce myself for those of you who maybe don't know me yet. My name is Judith Cobb, and I got into holistic health over 40 years ago because I had some health problems that the medical doctors were not able to put their fingers on. And so when the opportunity presented itself to me at about the age of 20 or so to start studying and learning, I grabbed it. I was also going to university to be a school teacher at the time. And I'm just ever so grateful that I learned about and was able to study holistic healing. I have tremendous respect for school teachers. I'm so grateful I did not finish that degree. I had enough credits to graduate, but not enough in one major, early childhood or secondary. And so I quit university and went into holistic health completely, and with a huge focus. In the many years I've been in this industry, I have written many books, and I've self-distributed them, self-published them. Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook. I've also created and taught many courses. Herbology Level 1 was the original one that we started about 35 years ago. That was way before there was really much of anything available for training. For people in general, there was correspondence courses, but there was nothing that was face-to-face back then, at least not where I lived. And so I put together a 20-hour program to teach people how to use commercially available, commercially prepared herbs. They loved it. We used to teach that 3 times a year, full class with a wait list. Sometimes we'd have to add an extra night to get more people in. Taught that for many years, and the students loved it so much that they asked for more. So we created the next level, which was 16 hours of, now that you know your individual herbs, what do you look for in combinations, and how do you tell by looking at a label with the ingredients that are in there what it's good for, because the labels are always very narrow. If you can figure out what the secret code is or whatever it is on the front, like HSNW, well, what's that for? Well, it's hair, skin, and nails, of course. But what else can those herbs be used for? What else can that blend be used for? One of my favorite herbs for women's problems actually was labeled as an eye wash formula. Right. And so in the 16-hour advanced course, we were teaching how to dissect pre-made formulas so that you would know what other things you could use it for. I also designed and taught Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and Level 2. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term biokinesiology, its other name is muscle testing. And for a few years, I was a certified prenatal educator with the International Childbirth Education Association. And so I taught classes, designed and taught classes for that. And that was so much fun. I love doing the fertility, prenatal, labor, delivery, postnatal work. That's some of my favorite stuff. And of course, I've designed and taught the iridology program, which we now call Dynamic Iridology Assessment System. This is a course that is approved by the International Iridology Practitioners Association. It meets the requirements for what they consider to be a Level 1 and Level 2 curriculum. And so if you'll stay with me to the very end today, we'll just take like 37 seconds to talk a little bit more about that course, because it is starting up again in January. I am also a proud member of, I'm not the only member, I am a proud member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals, the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners, and the Alberta Herbalist Association. I've got these credentials that allow me to be a member of these different organizations from so many different places. Like I've got nutrition from 2 different schools. I've got herbal training from 2 different schools. I've got iridology from 8 different instructors. And so as we look at that, and I totally skipped over that one slide. Let me just back up the bus. How did I do that? There we go, to this one. I've had 8 different iridology instructors that have gotten me to the point where I'm at now. And so I am a certified iridologist with IPA, and we have to renew that every 2 years by showing proof of upgrade hours. And same with being a certified instructor with IPA. We have to show proof of upgrade every 2 years. Did I say, I said every 2 years, I think. I'm getting my words crossed today. Every 2 years. And so that's how we know we are always current, right? We are always striving to have the most up-to-date information and to make sure that that is what we are teaching. So today we are focusing on 5 particular questions that are introductory. First off, what is iridology? For those of you who are brand new to it and you've just heard this big word and you're maybe not entirely sure what it is, where did it come from? Why does it work? What can it teach us, and how should it be used? Now, if you've got other questions you'd like me to answer, go ahead and type them in the chat or the comments box. And if we can fit them into the time we have today, and if they're appropriate for the topic we're discussing, I would be happy to answer those for you. All right, you ready to start? What is iridology? Well, iridology is the study of the iris of the eye. And of course, that is the colored part of the eye. For those who might be really new to this, it is pronounced iridology, not iridology. It's got a long I for the first sound. Constitutional iridology recognizes that certain iris traits always suggest a short list of specific health predispositions, and that we can, when we juxtapose these different traits that we see in the eye against each other, or when we group them together, it gives us even more information. And mostly what it gives us is an understanding of the body to know what questions we need to be asking our client. This is really important. Constitutional iridology is about a conversation with the client. What we see in an iris is inherited for up to 4 generations back. So we've got information in the iris from the parents, the grandparents, the parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents in some cases. We cannot see the iris change by doing cleanses, fasting, or taking special herbs or supplements. I've been at this for, like I said, 4 decades. I've been using an iridology camera for over 35 of those years. Never have I seen, in spite of intense cleanses, intense protocols, never have I seen markings disappear from an iris. We see the sclera change. We may see things accumulate, or we may see, because of genetic cues, we might see signs come up in the iris, but we don't see them go away. We don't use supplements to change what we see in the eye. We don't use diet to change what we see in the eye. We use supplements and diet and lifestyle changes to improve health and wellness. Does that make sense? The eyes are genetic, and it provides a framework that helps us to understand our clients' physical health and emotional and personality tendencies as well. So we see more than just physical tendencies. We do see other types of tendencies as well. When we are doing modern iridology, we also want to have a background conversation with the client. We want to understand where they're coming from, what their goals are, what they've already tried, what their lifestyle is like now before we start moving forward with them. We also want to look at the sclera, or the white of the eye, because where the iris itself is genetic, the sclera is dynamic. The sclera can change quite quickly. And you know this if you've ever had a good hard cry and your eyes were instantly bloodshot. And then you splashed cool water on your face and you waited 45 minutes and your eyes cleared up. The sclera is very, very dynamic. In all of that, though, that good hard cry didn't change your iris, didn't change the markings we see in the iris. The blood vessels of the sclera are really dynamic. They show us where current hotspots are. And when they have just, when they're just newly obvious, they show us where subclinical hotspots are. So we see things as we see things developing in the iris, or sorry, in the sclera. In the sclera, we need to have conversations with our client to double check and make sure that that we are actually asking the right questions and that we are on the right path. Right? We want to find out, do they have any symptoms? Is there anything that we should be aware of that they have noticed that's off a little bit that we could be working with to prevent further development of things? So the sclera can show us where subclinical hotspots are. It can show us where hotspots have been for a while. So where did iridology actually come from? Well, we know it's rooted in ancient cultures. We know we've found documentation of it from Egypt, India, China, and Greece, where all the good stuff actually came from. One of our challenges with iridology is that it has evolved. There's research that is ongoing. And just as things that we knew medically or practiced medically 100 years ago have been disproven and we would no longer do them, we wouldn't dare do them because they're so wrong, iridology has had the same kind of an evolution, right? With iridology, we have seen things that were theoretical 100 years ago be disproved. Unfortunately, some people are clinging to those old theories and are teaching them and perpetuating them even when they have been disproved. So one of the things that we need to be very aware of when we're doing iridology is to make sure that what we are learning is actually up to date, that it is based on current information. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me a wave. And someone is asking me, how do I get the videos? Are you meaning the replays of these? And that's on Instagram. NGWani831, if you're meaning how do you get the replays, let me know and I can put you in touch. Send me a PM. All righty, so let's go back to the roots of iridology in this iteration. Many of you have heard the story of Ignaz von Petschle, who was an 11-year-old boy in Budapest, Hungary. That is the only thing that is rock solid here. That is the only thing that we really know for sure, because the story then starts to get muddy. We don't know whether it was an owl or another bird of prey. Most of the stories say an owl. We don't know if Ignaz was trying to catch him or trap him or had trapped him, or if Ignaz found him in the wild. And if somehow in getting contact with this bird, a wing or a leg got broken, or if it was already broken when Ignaz found him. There's a lot of muddy details here. As an 11-year-old boy, though, Ignaz says he saw a black line in the owl's eye, and that as he took this bird home, nursed it back to health, and worked with it, he noticed that the black line disappeared. Now, here's one of the challenges we have with this. It's never been replicated. One would think that if indeed this happened in an owl eye, that with all of the bird sanctuaries, the rescue sanctuaries where injured birds are brought in and nursed back to health and then rehabilitated to go back into the wild, we would think that some veterinarians, some technician would have noticed the same thing, but it's never ever been documented. So we don't know what Ignaz saw. We just know this has never been replicated. And so we have to let go of this story. The other thing we need to be aware of is that the surface of an owl's eye or a bird's eye is very different from the surface of a human eye. And so we need to be very, very aware that that the beauty of this story, of this experience for us, is that it triggered Ignaz so that later on as an adult, he became a doctor. And in his medical world, he started paying attention to his clients' irides, finding out what their stories were, and taking it further and documenting what he saw and correlating their stories to what he saw in their eyes. Okay, so that's why we love Ignaz. Moving forward, and we're just going to cover the history very briefly here. We've got Pastor Neil Lilliquist, who very accurately noted that when we have an eye that has very dense fiber, like we have in the image on the left, this is a person who has got good resilience. If they take care of their body and if they nourish it well, they will stay really well. If they do have a challenge of some sort, their bodies tend to respond quickly to the right kinds of treatments. People that have a looser fiber structure tend to have less resistance to disease, less resilience when they are recovering. And so really that's important information for us to know. He also felt that pigment, any extra colors in the eye like this were the result of being exposed to something toxic. We now know that is not the case. We now know that that is actually the result of simply genetics. And the pigment tells us which organ wants to struggle. The placement of the pigment tells us which organs are being impacted by that. All right. And so again, when we've got fairly straight, fairly dense fiber, this is someone who's got good resistance to disease and good resilience for healing. When we've got someone who's got a looser weave with more open fiber structure, this is someone who has less resistance to disease and less resilience when they are healing. Moving on, we have Pastor Manuel Falca, who also mapped the iris, did the studies, interviewed people, drew their irises, and started mapping out the story against what he saw in the eyes. And it's interesting that all of these early researchers who created maps didn't have contact with each other. They weren't sharing notes. They didn't have the internet. They didn't even know the other person was doing this. And yet their maps were virtually identical. And they didn't have computers to correlate what they were finding, you know, to run an algorithm to blah, 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 right? They did this all by hand, which is absolutely amazing. Rudolf Schnabel did a lot of research into pigment, which again is our little freckles of color and the washes of color we see in an eye, even these pale, pale colors we see in this image. And he also did a lot of study into pupil tonus, the shape of the pupil, the size of the pupil. I mean, as you look at this, you will see this pupil is not round, right? It's a little bit of an oval, kind of sitting on this direction, an ellipse, right? And so this pupil is a little bit flat on the top. And this gives us even more information when we understand pupil tonus and pigment. Takes us a long way, gives us more information. And pupil tonus is very dynamic. The pupil shape and size can be changed with proper therapies. And as the pupil changes, we see that the body is being brought into balance, or if it's going the other way, if we're seeing things flatten out or things become more elliptical, we know that things are going more out of balance. It takes time. It's not a sudden change, right? It takes a long time to get that to change, but it's totally connected to the nervous system. Rudolf Schnabel said it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy, which was his way of saying learning iridology, can be learned in a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. And I totally agree, and it's one of the reasons why I teach my course the way I do teach it. Joseph Ungerer, he was a student of Schnabel's, and he knew that his students were reading books and accepting anything that was in print. But he also knew that much of what was in print had not been proven, that it was theoretical. So he set his own standards very, very high, and he refused to publish any of his work until it had passed muster, if you will, until it had been analyzed and reviewed by his professional peers. He had a very, very high standard of what he was going to let out into the world. Joseph Deck, who is the father of modern constitutional iridology, was a dedicated iridology researcher. You're seeing that these people were pretty much all in Central Europe. He pioneered iridology photography, and he did a lot of teaching. Theodor Kriege, who studied under Ungerer, Deck, and Schnabel, so he had 3 different instructors, felt that iridology was the #1 assessment tool, but that it was best used combined with other tools like urine analysis, hand analysis, fingernails, tongue, and feces. In 1962, he said this: "I hope that a later generation will succeed in establishing a single uniform system. In spite of zealous efforts, these have so far not succeeded." And that's actually where we still are some 50 years later, struggling with so many different styles of iridology that don't match up, right? We are still striving to unify the whole thing. Then, of course, we have our beloved Dr. Jensen, who kept iridology alive in North America during the Cold War, when all of this information and research was still going on in Europe. It came to a grinding halt in North America. But Bernard had studied well, and he kept it alive. He was very much more of the old school style, things like pigments are the result of toxicity. We can change the fiber structure of the eye, and so on. In about 1980, just before, well, actually late 1970s, Harry Wolff, who was an American-born German, got a hold of Joseph Deck's book in German and studied it and was blown away by it. And he started practicing and teaching constitutional iridology in the Deck style. Bill Cardona, who at the time was a registered pharmacist, connected with Harry. Bill was frustrated with the fact that so many of his pharmacy clients kept coming back for the same drugs or stronger versions of the same drugs, and he realized that pharmacy wasn't helping them to get well. So he joined with Harry Wolff and started studying and teaching the constitutional style of iridology. And then Bill went on to teach iridology at Bastyr Naturopathic College in Seattle. And he went on to become a naturopath in his own right. And so he is a very busy naturopath in Seattle right now. Bill was my constitutional teacher. I had many other Jensenian teachers prior to that, but Bill was my face-to-face constitutional teacher. And Harry was the one who was actually my very first not face-to-face, because he produced the videotapes on constitutional iridology that I started with, that I studied so many times before I was able to bring Bill up to Canada to teach. So we are grateful to Bernard Jensen for keeping iridology alive, and we're grateful to Harry and Bill for furthering the progress of iridology. So why does iridology work? This is a great question. Why does iridology work? It works because your eye is the largest neural receptor in your body, right? Your eye is connected via nerves directly to the brain. It is your eyes are your largest neural receptor. We know that the iris has over 28,000 nerve endings. We don't know what most of them do just yet. That is ongoing research. The eyeball develops embryologically at the same time that the nervous system does, right? Because the eyes are a part of the nervous system. If there's a challenge in the body that the brain knows about, there is usually some kind of a marker in the iris. Challenges, we need to remember that these challenges that we're seeing, or these markers we're seeing in the eyes, are inherent potentials. They're not guarantees of a problem. They tell us what has been handed down over the generations, right? But that doesn't mean that you are going to have a problem just because you've got that mark in your eye. Is this making sense? That just because there's a mark in the eye doesn't mean there's a problem right now. It means there's the potential for a problem. And we're going to do 3 iris analyses in just a minute to go over how this works. But first, I just want to plant this little seed. The seed is that the upcoming course Dynamic Iridology Assessment System starts on February 9th, and course registration is open now. We'll give you a few more details on that just before we wrap up at the end today. If you are already a health professional and you know you want to either update your skills or add iridology to your toolbox, and you're interested in learning a lot more about the course, feel free to book a call. That URL is tinyurl.com/insight-call. And in this call, this is not to sell you on anything. Just like today, I'm not selling you anything. It's actually to find out where you're at in your studies or in your practice, if there are any hitches that you're coming up against, and if iridology could actually be beneficial to you. And do you have the right background to actually begin learning iridology right out of the starting blocks? And if I find that, yeah, it's a perfect fit, then I will offer you enrollment. If we find that it's not a great fit right now, I will give you some coaching as to what you could do to help it become a better fit in the near future, right? So it's all about making sure that this is the right fit. What can iridology teach us? Let's recenter for our Instagram friends. There we go. Well, again, we're focusing on the iris in today's webinar. For those of you that are with me on Instagram, I will move the camera closer for you in just a moment. Remember that iridology teaches us about inherent predispositions. It teaches us what questions we need to ask the client. What does that conversation need to look like? This is what we would consider a biliary constitution. And when we see a biliary constitution, we know that our key areas that we want to be asking questions about are liver, digestion, and blood sugars. Now, this particular client, female in her mid-60s, came in complaining of lots of stress, and she wanted to lose some weight. She brought in some lab results from her medical doctor that showed her A1C was elevated, her hemoglobin A1C, and her cholesterol was also elevated. Now, this eye in particular tells us that this person is predisposed to spending a lot of time reacting in the sympathetic nervous system. So as we look at this eye and we see these rings around here, these do not mean she has chronic stress. They mean that her body is programmed to respond more acutely to stress. So she's more likely to have the fight, flight, or freeze, or to have some anxiety or maybe some depression. Not a guarantee of those, because maybe she's already learned how to manage her stress. Maybe she's taking the right supplements. Maybe she does yoga. Maybe she uses aromatherapy. We don't know how she's handling her stress until we ask her. Now, she is a little bit prone to having her liver run the show. And again, that's showing up in the coloring in her eyes. But that liver can show up as some immune challenges. It can show up as blood symptoms, including the elevated cholesterol. It can show up as issues with allergies, hormonal issues, or digestive issues. So we need to ask questions. We need to have a conversation with this client to understand what her health history is and what her current symptoms are. When we see certain pigments sitting in the eye, we know that she is at high risk of having the MTHFR defect. Now, when you understand MTHFR, you know that that also is from the liver. And so we needed to assess for that and appropriate supplement her with the MTHFR defect. She'll never be free of it. She will always need to be using the right format of B vitamins. She has a central heterochromia, so around the center of her eye, is a little bit of a different color. And this is telling us that the liver wants to impact her digestion. And so when you understand your anatomy and physiology, you'll understand how the liver impacts digestion. You'll understand how the liver affects her hemoglobin A1C and her blood sugars. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important when you come into an iridology class that you have a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology. And I don't mean just that you've read a good book. I mean that you've actually taken a course. She does live in her sympathetic response zone. And what that does mean is that she, again, reacts a little more acutely to stress. And we know that stress doesn't make anything better, right? She's got a little bit of orange in her eyes, which again underscores the liver and the pancreas, and the brown underscores more liver. When we look in her sclera, we see that she's got some blood vessels that are running parallel to the limbus of the iris. And this suggests circulatory congestion. When we note where this is happening in her iris, it then tells us that for her, the congestion is probably in her heart and lungs. And because these vessels are very fine, it's probably not very advanced. That would lead us to suspect that there is the beginning of some blockage in her circulatory system. We have more over here as well. This is correlating to other body parts that probably have congestion in the circulation. Now, I can't diagnose that. I'm an iridologist, not a medical doctor. And so I need to be very careful how I say things. I need to ask questions. Have you ever been assessed for? Is there a personal or family history of? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? If it does, let me know. Give me a makes sense in the comments box. Now, as we're doing this, some recommendations that I made for her that were easy to implement. Things like add leafy greens to the diet, because leafy greens are good for the liver. Add protein at every meal, and we had to talk about what does that exactly mean, because she wasn't getting enough protein to keep her blood sugar stable. We increased her low carbohydrate vegetables, and we cut out the refined carbohydrates from her diet. We also added omega-3 to her diet because she has that elevated cholesterol, which, we're suspecting may be doing something in her arteries. We added some berberine. Thank you, Jay Jones, for saying that makes sense. I truly appreciate that. And Eric is saying, yes, ma'am. Excellent. Thank you. We added some berberine to her because berberine is good for insulin resistance. We added some garden essence enzymes to her to help get her digestion working a little bit better. She implemented all these changes really well. She was motivated, and she came back about 3 months later with some new lab tests that she had just had done. She had actually fixed all of her blood numbers. Her cholesterol was normal. Her hemoglobin A1C was normal, and she had lost 20 pounds. Now, here's the challenge. Stress hit. We know that she internalizes her stress because she's got all those contraction furrows. She fell off her program, and she was off her program for the better part of a year. All of her numbers reverted back to being out of balance, and then she had a massive heart attack. Now, fortunately, she survived. Her husband was smart enough. His industrial first aid training told him she was having a heart attack, and rather than calling an ambulance, they live about 3 minutes from a hospital. He got her into the car and got her there really quickly, and she's doing fine. She's totally recovered, and she's been given a clean bill of health. But we have been working to get her onto a consistent program. We've been working with talking about how to manage her stress and how to work through stress when it happens. And we are beginning to see her numbers correct again. So constitutional iridology does not enable us to diagnose. I could not have told this client she was headed towards a heart attack. That would be diagnosing. It does not give us disease names. I can't say she's got type 2 diabetes, but I can say from things that I see in her eye that her eyes are suggesting there may be imbalances. So we use iridology to guide us to where the issues may be. It guides our questions and it informs our suggestions. Now, did you notice I did not say anything like this person is toxic? This person needs to cleanse. This person has a congested liver. I didn't say these eyes look unhealthy. I've seen those kinds of comments made on lots of Facebook sites, and it just kind of gets under my skin. We can't possibly know those things from looking at the eyes alone. We need to have a conversation with a client to understand what their symptoms are and what the person is already doing for their health. We need context to do an iris analysis. This is so important. Without having this context, we are simply playing doctor and we're pretending we are being holistic, right? We need the context to be truly holistic. All righty, any questions about that eye before we move on? Give you just a few seconds. I know there's about a 15-second lag. Let's move on to our next set of eyes. This is a client in her mid-30s. She is what we would call lymphatic, polyglandular, and anxiety tetanic. Now, what all that comes down to, we're going to break some of that down. She has a tight collarette, a constricted collarette, which suggests she is a bit of an introvert. She's predisposed to constipation. And we also know that she's probably not great with producing energy. However, we must always ask the client. We never tell them what they're feeling. We ask them, we'll ask them, how's your energy? Do you have enough energy to get through the day? Do you have any low spots in the day? Right? Because maybe she's already figured out that she needs to eat on time. She needs to get good quality proteins and she needs to eat 4 or 5 times a day. And when she does that, her energy can be quite stellar, right? So we need to ask the questions. She is polyglandular, which means that she has inherited a predisposition towards hormone imbalance. So we need to ask about thyroid, pancreas, adrenals, reproductive. And really her main concern in coming to me is that she and her husband have been trying to get pregnant and she's wondering why it's not working. So she'd had some labs done and we got her charting her basal body temperature. And her basal body temperature suggested, in spite of what the medical lab said, that she might be a little bit on the low thyroid side. Now her diet's really clean. It's an organic diet. She really does put some effort in. And whenever I make a suggestion of increase the protein, get more fats in your diet, she's got it in place instantly. She did have a miscarriage about a year ago, about 2 years ago now, and a chemical pregnancy about a year ago. All right, so when we look at this, we said she's polyglandular. She has a bit of a central heterochromia, which in her case is suggesting that there might be a little bit of blood sugar and pancreas imbalance and maybe a predisposition towards some allergies as well. She is predisposed to a little bit of lymphatic stagnation, but I'm not worried about that because she has a very active lifestyle. She is at an optimal weight and she's very active. Constitutionally, her eyes do suggest a bit of a predisposition towards some leaky gut as well. But again, her diet is good and she's got no other symptoms of leaky gut, so we don't really need to go there with her. When we look at her nutritive zone, what we see is she has some comb teeth, and we see that there's a little bit of a gray behind this as well. And that suggests she may not digest her proteins very well. So we wanted to not only just increase her protein content, that would make no sense to give her more protein if she was not capable of digesting it, right? And so we needed to give her some help supporting her digestion. She has some orange pigments, which suggest pancreas blood sugar. But again, she's got a good clean diet. Both of her ovary reaction fields have weird fibers happening in them, little errant fibers here and over here. And that could be giving us a clue as to what's going on. So in her first appointment, we suggested using a good quality prenatal vitamin that has the methylated Bs, because I suspect there might be a methylation problem here as well. We wanted to make sure she got some good nerve nutrients, and we wanted to do some liver support. So we used some N-acetylcysteine with her, and we did, some various other things to support the nervous system. We increased her healthy protein. She's not a vegetarian or a vegan, so we were able to suggest that she use some wild fish and that we add some omegas to her diet. And you see how understanding her eyes, understanding her symptoms, and understanding anatomy and physiology all helped to guide questions we needed to ask and recommendations we were going to make. All right. Here we have another client, and AJ1 Lucy on Instagram is asking, can you read my eyes? Shoot me a PM and we'll talk about how that works. So what do we have here? We've got a female mid-50s who has hot flashes. Now, she was a client of mine some 20 odd years ago, and I honestly didn't remember her, which was sad. But the fact of the matter is I fixed her problem in 2 appointments back then, and she didn't need to come back. Now she had a problem, and now she needed to come back to see me. So that's really cool that she thought, here's someone who can solve the problem, because she'd already gone the medical route to deal with these hot flashes. And with these hot flashes, we assessed her eyes and her diet and her lifestyle. And this is where we went with this, right? She has a hematogenic eye type. So we've seen one of each of the 3 primary eye types here. With this hematogenic eye type, we know that liver is the undercurrent to everything. Her diet was pretty good. She's pretty holistic in her approach to things. She wants to get rid of her hot flashes. That's the one thing. She's at an optimal body weight. She's physically active. So looking at her eyes, I asked her about her nervous system. I wanted to know about her adrenals. I wanted to know if she functioned in the sympathetic response mode. And she's a psychologist, so she understands what that means. So I could use that terminology with her. I would not use that terminology with a brand new client who did not have that foundation. I wanted to know what her sleep was like, how she regenerates, what she does to handle stress better, and if she has any symptoms of stress. And she said, yeah, when she gets stressed, her hot flashes get worse. And that is really a very common symptom, a very common symptom. I asked her about her liver, since that is a key player here. She said no problems digesting fats. And so I asked her, because the liver emotionally is where we hold our anger and our bitterness and resentment. She said she used to really hold on to a grudge, but she'd really worked through that and was now to the point where she could easily let go of things that would have upset her in the previous, in previous years. The only real thing in her diet that was not helping her, that was actually playing against her, was that she has a cup of coffee every day. Now, my experience is that coffee always makes hot flashes worse. It's not good for the stomach lining. It's not good for the liver. It's not good for the adrenals. And whatever you want to say that's good about coffee, redeeming value, I've got experience that says I disagree. And so I asked her if she would be willing to do an experiment. Would she be willing to give up the coffee for 10 days and just assess how does she feel? When she came back for her follow-up appointment 3 or 4 weeks later, I asked her how it had gone, and she had cut the coffee out for the 10 days. She said the hot flashes completely went away. I said, great, so what is your decision now? How do you want to proceed? And she said, I don't drink alcohol, I work out, I have a healthy diet, I have really good self-care in place, and I really like my 1 cup of coffee. I'm going to keep drinking the coffee. And if we don't have anything holistic that you can offer me that will override that, and I don't, she said, then I guess I'm just going to have to go and do hormone replacement therapy, which made me sad because she'd already tried that and it really affected her emotionally, right? We could add some B vitamins to help the adrenals and to help reduce the amount of stress the coffee puts on the adrenals, but it's not going to be enough to mitigate the hot flashes. So as we have done these little iris analyses and you've seen how it works, can you see how adding iridology or using iridology in this way could help in your health coaching business? Can you see how it could speed up your assessments, help you see more clients and spend less of your own time, perhaps creating programs for your clients? Can you see how it would help you to laser in on what your clients' needs are more effectively? So how do we use iridology? This is the next question that we want to ask. I'm running out of screen space here. Let's put my face up out of the way. All right, so how do we use iridology? Well, we use it to gain insight. We use it to guide our questions, help us ask better questions that are client-centered, as opposed to just a great big long list of questions we normally would ask. We use it to create rapport with our clients. We use it to inform our recommendations. And we use it to help us create doable sequences of recommendations to enhance our client success. Creating massive programs for our clients doesn't help them to be successful. It actually helps them to fail. Far better for us to start where our client is, create a program based on what they're doing and where they want to go, and to create that program in steps and stages that are manageable so they can learn better principles to help themselves. That's exactly why I love teaching this to holistic health practitioners, right? So again, just a quick little bit of information here. We aren't going into huge details. The dynamic iridology assessment system is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care so that they can stop working unpaid overtime. Do you know how many practitioners, and maybe you do this, donate hours when the client is not there creating programs? Not a great way to run a business. When we do that, when we spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours creating programs for our clients, we put way too much information into them. The programs then overwhelm our clients. They can't follow through. They can't comply with it. They're not going to end up doing all of it. They'll pick and choose what they think they can do. And then because they're not getting the results you said they would get, and because they haven't stuck to the program, they think they've failed, and they're not going to come back and tell you they failed, right? So when we do iridology the way I teach it here, the way I teach it in the course, I teach you how to not overwhelm your clients, how to create programs they can actually manage to stick with and get success with. I would rather have my clients be successful in baby steps and see consistent and positive improvement that they can continue with for the rest of their life, rather than have them give up after 2 appointments because it's just too hard, right? So again, I invite you, if you are a health professional, or if you are a student enrolled in a program to become a health professional, and if you're interested in learning about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System program, schedule a call with me. Again, this isn't to sell you on anything, it's to see if it's a good fit. And if it is a good fit, I will offer you the opportunity to enroll. If it's not a good fit right now, I will give you some guidance to help you move along in your pathway, in your educational pathway, so that this can become the right fit for you at some time in the future. How does that sound? Does that sound okay? Yeah. All right. So I haven't seen any other questions come in. I appreciate you being with me today. If you've got another question or comment you'd like to make, pop it in real quick before we wrap up for the day. And I look forward to seeing you again. The replay link for this will be sent out to anybody who registered for the webinar. I cannot send it out to those who are on Facebook, or sorry, on Instagram, because it just is too much legwork. So when you see the posts in my Instagram account saying this workshop is coming up, if you would like to register, shoot me an emoji, then I can shoot you the registration link, and we'll make sure then that you get the replay link. Alrighty. So with that, my friends, thank you for the thumbs up, and thanks for being with me today. It's been great, and it's been so good to have so many of you with me live on the webinar as well. Take care, make it a wonderful day, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye for now.